This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to do a smackdown between two really hot high-end Windows 8 convertible tablet, whatever you want to call them. We have the Sony Vaio Flip 13, which is both an Ultrabook and a tablet and something in between, and the Microsoft Surface Pro 2, which is arguably the best Windows 8 tablet on the market. We're going to look at them now. Well, here are two of the hottest products for the fall of 2013. If you're looking for something that runs Windows 8, full Windows 8 64-bit, we have the Microsoft Surface Pro 2, little 10.6-inch powerhouse, and we have the Sony Vaio Flip 13, a 13-inch Ultrabook that converts into a tablet. First, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that the Flip is also available as a Flip 14 and a Flip 15, making it more versatile for those of you who also want bigger machines. Obviously, the Surface Pro 2 is one size only, and it's for the really seriously ultra-portable oriented crowd. What do they have in common? They both have full HD 1080p IPS displays. They both run on Intel Haswell 4th generation Core CPUs. Now with the Sony you can get a Core i3, a Core i5, or a Core i7. That's nice. Sony always has all sorts of options if you buy from their website. You should be able to find them in stores sooner or later. New product, pretty hot, hard to find. The Microsoft Surface Pro 2 is only available as a Core i5, but you know that's pretty adequate for most of us. In terms of RAM, you can get these with 4 or 8 gigs of DDR3 dual channel RAM, and they'll all have SSD drives, both of them using mSATA technology. Now the price starts at $10.99 for our Flip 13 and $8.99 for the Surface Pro 2, but in each case we wouldn't recommend the base model. For $8.99 you're going to get the 64 gig SSD on the Surface Pro 2. 64 gigs of storage is just really not enough for a full Windows 8 machine, because Windows itself, associated applications take up a lot of space, so you're left with, if you're lucky, what, 25, 28 gigs of storage space for your very own, to put all your applications and other stuff on. They both have expansion card slots, so you can put media on SD cards, micro SD in the case of the Surface Pro 2, or full-size SD in the case of the Sony. Now our Sony at $10.99, that's the one with the Core i3, which we don't generally recommend because you lose turbo boost. You really do lose performance there. So spend $100 more, go up to $11.99, and get the one with the Core i5. Another thing that brings up the Surface Pro 2 price is the fact that that nice little keyboard with the backlighting, you notice, is turning on when even I go near it. It's got actually a sensor, so it knows if you put your hand over it. You got to pay $120 extra for the keyboard to $130, depending on whether you want the touch cover 2 or the type cover 2. So you're getting pretty close in pricing with the two of these when you take that into consideration, going up to the 128 gig Surface Pro 2 and getting yourself a keyboard. You're looking at $1,100. Both of these guys have digital pens, different technology inside. Our Flip 13, now the pen doesn't come with all SKUs, but it will work with all SKUs, just to confuse people, and if you watch our full review of this, you'll know that. It has an N-Trig digital pen, and the Surface Pro 2 has Wacom. Now both of these work very well, and they're true digital pens with palm rejection, precise small tips. You can see our Surface Pro 2, it clips right on here on the side magnetically to the charging port. And our Sony pen right here, $40 additional if it doesn't come with the one that you buy. Also has a precise digital tip. This has a metal body. This one has a little quadruple A battery inside. The Wacom pen does not need the battery. It has a plastic barrel. It has an eraser at the end. This one does not have the eraser function. They both have buttons on the barrel, and generally speaking, most applications assign one of the N-Trig buttons to eraser, so you still have an eraser function pretty conveniently there. Now, differences between these two digitizers for you pen type people. If you're taking notes, you'll get pressure sensitivity and Outlook and all Windows Ink API aware modern applications. That means ArtRage, Manga Studio 5, for example, but not in Photoshop with N-Trig or anything that uses WinTab. Also, you have to get closer to the display with the N-Trig pen before it's detected by the display, and you want it to be detected so it knows the pen's there, so it'll ignore your hand. Wacom has a very far hovering distance. That's how far away I am. I'm pretty far, and it's noticing it right away like that. So that can be a preference for some people. You just don't want to have to make sure you're methodically getting the pen really close before you take a note. But for note taking, these are both excellent choices. The pen tracking is actually a little bit more accurate with the N-Trig. That is, you don't have an offset from where your cursor appears versus where you're actually holding your pen tip, particularly near the edges of the display. But if I was an artist, I would definitely go with the Surface Pro 2 because it has that WinTab support, that Photoshop, Corel Painter, Paint Tool SAI require. Now Photoshop will be moving over to Windows Ink API hopefully by the end of the year for the latest version of Photoshop CS6 and for Creative Cloud version, not for older versions, but still that doesn't mean Corel Painter is going to come over real quick or some of the others. So yeah, for art I would still really go with Wacom. No taking either way unless you really hate having to get the pen close with N-Trig. One last point of difference is N-Trig supports 256 levels of pressure sensitivity, and the Wacom Digitizer in our Surface Pro 2 supports 1024. Now for note takers that's not going to matter. You make a light line or a heavy line, you're going to see the difference, that's good enough. For artists who do more nuanced work, you're probably going to prefer more levels of pressure sensitivity, though you can certainly get by and do some very nice artwork on the Sony too. Most important differences between these machines really are size. First off, if you think a 13.3-inch Ultrabook is small, well, again, you can get the 14 or the 15-inch with the Flip. But if you think 13.3 is as small as you can go comfortably for the size of the screen that you're working with, keyboard, that kind of thing, obviously something that looks and acts like an Ultrabook is going to be a better choice. And gee, when you close it up, it looks just like an Ultrabook. Surface Pro 2 is for those of you who want the full power of an Ultrabook, full core CPUs, up to 8 gigs of RAM. You can get a 512 gig SSD if you want. Really very powerful machine here, but in as small a package as possible, 10.6 inches and 2 pounds. This thing is wildly portable, and the keyboard covers really don't add much weight, but they do give you protection for the screen. So you get some semblance of something like a laptop experience when you close that cover. And we're using the type cover too that has the movie clicky keys as opposed to the touch cover too on this. And the touch cover 2 and type cover 2 are much improved, particularly the touch cover 2. The first touch cover was a little bit of a pain to use. The new version much better. This one right here with the clicky keys, very nice to use. I actually have enjoyed using this to write some full reviews, but it is 10.6 inches. So it's small. If you're a guy with really big hands, you might find this too cramped. It's not the same experience as something that's 13.3 inches or bigger. So if you do a lot of writing, something to keep in mind. I think this is pretty tolerable. Really, that's going to be a matter of personal preference and the size of your hands. So those are really the two most important differences. The other thing is some of you are very sensitive to display angles. And here we have our little friend at his first angle, which is about 24 degrees. And Microsoft heard your complaints and that you wanted a second position. So now we have this. So that's good for lower tray tables, for your lap, that kind of thing. Since this valance goes across the back, it's suitable enough to put on your lap if you want to type with. But if the idea of not having this at any old angle that you want really drives you crazy, well then the Sony, which has more like normal notebook opening settings, is probably for you. You might think it only opens this far. When you first open it, that's because it hits the little rubber feet before it props it up a little bit. So there we have normal notebook position. Obviously we have anything in between going forward. And it can go back as far as that. So it's actually pretty far back. So more versatility there. And of course, if we slide the release latch right here, we have more tricks. This is how it turns into tablet or presentation mode. So you can use it in presentation mode, like so. Show folks your screen. And you can close it up and use it like a tablet, so much like the Surface Pro 2, only bigger. 13.3 inches certainly feels very spacious, not just if you're watching movies where it's nice to have the extra screen real estate, but if you are doing note-taking or artwork, you've got a lot more room to work with. So there's some things to be said for this bigger screen here. Both of these have IPS displays. The viewing angles on Sony's IPS displays, this is a triluminous display, are not the widest in the industry, but I think it's quite tolerable. This is a little bit better than the Duo 13 actually in terms of viewing angles. Glare is going to be an issue on either of these to a certain extent, even though they use thin bonded glass. If we take our Surface and wobble it around some, really good viewing angles there. It just hardly loses any contrast or color. It's pretty darn amazing. It is reflective despite that bonded glass, but both of these have 10 points of capacitive multi-touch. And as you can see, you can do this with the keyboard. It knows when you've done this with the keyboard, so you're not going to accidentally input anything on it. Surface Pro 2, these keyboards just come right off like that. They attach very firmly, but they're pretty easy to take off. When we put them like so, you can see quite a difference in size. So again, portability, which is more important to you? Do you want portability or do you want something that's more like the standard size normal notebook? In terms of performance, like I said, you get your Intel Core CPU 4th generation on either of these. You can get 4 or 8 gigs of RAM, up to 512 gig SSDs with either of these. The Surface Pro 2, despite being a little bit smaller, Microsoft really worked hard to improve the power circuitry and the cooling on this, and it actually scores a little bit higher on synthetic benchmarks like PC Mark 7, where it scored almost 5,000, the Surface, with a Core i5. Ours has 8 gigs of RAM and a 256 gig SSD. And our Sony scored in the 4400 range with a Core i5. Same Core i5, as a matter of fact, 8 gigs of RAM also and 128 gig SSD. So Microsoft did a good job of pushing performance. Also with battery life. When we first reviewed it, it had okay battery life. It was going about 6.5 hours, the Surface Pro 2. Then Microsoft came out with an update that allowed the wireless adapter to sleep more efficiently, and suddenly it just went crazy. We were doing like 8 hours on the Surface Pro 2. So again, for something this small, that is pretty darn impressive. Now, our Flip 13 goes at about 6 hours, and that's with both of these with Wi-Fi on and active brightness set at 50%. So it's not going to run as long despite the fact it's bigger. Sony didn't use a particularly large battery inside this to keep the size and weight down. 2.89 pounds, by the way, versus 2 pounds. Sony has also got a noisy fan. If you've watched our video review and read our written review, you know that the fan is always on, even when it's unplugged, even when it's idle. It's noisy pretty much all of the time, which is pretty annoying. We hope that Sony fixes that with a firmware or BIOS update, but we don't know if they will. They haven't said anything about that. In terms of color quality of the displays, the Sony is phenomenal. It's up there at the top displays. That includes the Mac with Retina display, Sony's other full HD, like the Vaio Pro 13 and the Duo 13 and the Samsung ATIV 9 Plus. You're talking 95% of sRGB and 75% of Adobe RGB. That's very wide color gamut. Beautiful, beautiful display. Now, even though Microsoft said they improved the Surface Pro 2 a lot when it comes to color gamut and color accuracy is great. Color gamut and how many colors it can reproduce is more average. So you're looking at 72% of sRGB on the Surface Pro 2 and 54% of Adobe RGB. Now, to your average user who's just watching movies and looking at photos, they're both going to look like stunning, gorgeous displays. It's not going to matter much. But for graphics art professionals who need a lot of color accuracy, that's where it's important. In terms of brightness, the Surface Pro 2 is a monster, almost 400 nits of brightness according to our Spider colorimeter, 390 it measured, whereas our Sony measured 295 nits. That's with auto brightness disabled on both of these. So Sony's pretty bright, the Surface is wildly bright. Important if you work outdoors, and with something that's this portable, I think that Microsoft knew that people were going to be using this out in the field, so they needed to be able to combat sunlight. When it comes to build quality materials, both of these are very high-end. You have vapor magnesium metal casing everywhere, including the apron on our Surface Pro 2. With the Sony, we have aluminum here. Nice brushed aluminum. It's available in your choice of silver or black. The Surface Pro 2 just comes in, it's basically black here. So very nice looking piece. The bottom on the Sony is plastic. That's okay with us. It doesn't get so hot. It doesn't transfer heat. But both of these very classy, very well put together, very good hinge mechanism. Certainly the apron on this is very sturdy, and this flipping mechanism is wildly stable and doesn't bounce at all. There's magnets to hold it stiff. There's an extra back plate over here. So in terms of hardware quality, they're great. They actually both have backlit keyboards. It's still a freaky thought to me that these touch and type covers are backlit, but as you saw, there is backlighting in this. And even in our touch cover too, right here, this auto-magically backlights. Just wave your hands over it and it will light up, which is pretty cool. Funny thing is, you can set the backlight levels on these keyboards, the Surface Pro 2 keyboards, but you cannot set the backlight level on the Sony. It decides for you. It turns it on using the ambient light sensor, and it puts it on, and it's pretty bright white, but you can't set it down dimmer if you want. Surface Pro 2, being a teeny weeny little thing, has abbreviated ports like most Windows 8 tablets, especially the small ones. We have our single USB 3.0 port over here. We have 3.5 millimeter combo audio, micro SD card slot. The Sony, being much more like an Ultrabook, gets you some more ports. Right here we have our headphone jack. We have speaker over here. Both of these have stereo speakers, by the way. Two USB 3.0 ports here instead of just one. Bad thing about this is they are a little bit close together, and there's an overhanging ledge over here, so you might have trouble using two fatties. You might have to use a little hub or something like that. SD and memory stick compatible slot right here. Card goes all the way in, doesn't stick out. Full-size HDMI. Now our Surface Pro 2 has a mini display port right over here, so this can drive higher resolution monitors that use DisplayPort technology as well. But if you want to use just regular HDMI, you're going to have to get a mini DisplayPort to HDMI converter, and they're about $15 or so. Microsoft does sell a dock for this. It's kind of pricey. It's $200, but it gets you an Ethernet port. It gets you more USB ports and all that kind of thing. So you can set it up on your desk more easily and not have to worry about dealing with a single USB port on this. Lastly, when it comes to cameras, the Sony wins on that. It has an 8 megapixel camera on the bottom, which is wildly high. Just like the Duo 13, they went with their Exmor sensor here, so going to get better photos out of this. The front is a 720p camera, a little bit more pedestrian. For Surface Pro 2, we have a front and rear 720p camera. That's all not very exciting. So in the end, it comes down to what size you want, how much fan noise you can tolerate, whether you're an artist or whether you're just a note taker. I know you guys always want to know which one I would pick, and this is a really hard one because these are both really, really cool. For me personally, though, I would go with the Surface Pro 2 because extreme portability is important to me, and so is Wacom technology because I do like to do digital art. But the Vaio Flip 13 is also very cool. If Sony can get the fan noise under control, then the decision gets even harder. So that's the Sony Vaio Flip 13 versus the Microsoft Surface Pro 2. Hopefully now you've heard the differences. It's going to be easier for you to decide. Obviously, if you're looking for something that's an Ultrabook first, it's going to be the Flip 13. If you're looking for something that's incredibly portable yet powerful, it's going to be the Microsoft Surface 2. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Visit our website for the full written review of both of these products and hit that like button.